Aggregation is the best Nancy Drew minigame. At least it is in my opinion. This video is going to go over Aggregation's beautiful game design, its elegant simplicity, its perfectly implemented difficulty system, and its surprisingly deep strategy. Now, I know a lot of people call this game Aggravation because there's a random aspect that decides your next piece. As a disclaimer, I'm a huge fan of turn-based strategy games like Final Fantasy X and Pokemon, and there's a random aspect to all of them, so I'm used to it, and this game's right up my alley. If you've never played Aggregation, or if it's been a while since you played Aggregation, allow me to go over the game for you, and I'll explain to you why I think it's the best Nancy Drew minigame out there. Before we hop into the video, I just want to let you know that we stream Nancy Drew games every Sunday night on the Twitch channel. We start at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. There's a link in the description box below if you want to check it out. If you want to see more original Nancy Drew content, hit the like button and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. In my experience, a lot of the minigames from the Nancy Drew series suffer from being either really tedious or really easy. On stream, we were playing the Deadly Device, and a viewer told us that you can get a trophy if you can beat level 25 of Aggregation. That sounded awful at first. And then we started playing it, and I got completely hooked, and 3 hours just flew by. So enough about my experience. Let's go over the game. Aggregation is played like this. There's a 9x9 grid filled with random colored objects. There are also 4 lines, 9 blocks each, outside the perimeter of that grid, and each line houses its own colored object. I'll be calling these outer lines the firing lines from now on. Consistent with Nancy Drew's point-and-click style, you can move each object freely inside the firing line to any of its 9 individual cells and click to send the object across that row or column. An object that is fired moves completely across the grid in that lane and stops once it comes into contact with another object. There are bombs that behave differently, but we'll be getting to that later. You cannot fire an object unless there is something it will land on in that lane. Whenever you fire an object, it gets replaced by whatever was listed in the up next box to the left of the game. The purpose of the game is to combine or aggregate 3 or more like objects, which will make them disappear. The way to beat a level is to have all the objects removed from the board. Aggregation is a game made up of simple parts, as you can easily tell from its very first level. As you continue through the game, though, you start to realize the absolute beauty in its design and execution. Aggregation consists of only 10 pieces in total, and that's if you include bombs, walls, stars, shields, and timer pieces. Considering that, the variety, depth, and challenge achieved in this game is absolutely remarkable. I think one of the things that I truly love about this game's design is that it's such a familiar game concept. I don't make this comparison lightly, but I would say that this game is very similar in a lot of ways to the all-time classic Tetris. That's right, I said it. Before you kill me in the comments, hear me out. Both have very limited pieces, a similar matching objective, an up next piece preview, and both games penalize and create pressure by reducing the total workspace as mistakes are made. But both games handle difficulty management very differently though. Where Tetris places a strict time constraint on the player, Aggregation gradually introduces new mechanics to ramp up difficulty. And each new addition starts creating a need for deeper consideration before clicking. The game starts out about as easy as possible. Here, Cat completes the first level in 2 clicks. The first 4 levels are easy like this and are exposing you to the core gameplay of Aggregation. Match the pieces, clear them from the board. At level 5, you learn of this rainbow star piece, which can be treated as if it's any of the plain colored pieces, and that there are walls which will restrict lanes from usage. The star can also be treated as multiple colors at once and can create matches with multiple objects if planned correctly. You get a buff and a nerf all at once, so the core challenge remains relatively the same. However, the walls persist through the entire level, and stars only show up occasionally, so the challenge has bumped up incrementally. You continue like this until level 9, where you're exposed to shielded pieces and the bomb, or as Cat calls it, the bomba. Once again, you gain a powerful new tool in the bomba, but also discover a new challenge in shielded pieces at the same time. Shielded pieces are identified with a surrounding green square and need to be aggregated twice to clear the piece. Bombs will destroy any pieces that surround it when it lands unless that piece is shielded or the blast is blocked by a wall. At level 11, walls are combined to create fenced-in areas with only 1 lane of entry. On this level, the game gives you lots of bombs and stars to help you work through the new challenge more easily. On the following level, you're introduced to timer pieces. Timer pieces are the worst. Timer pieces count down from 5, and once they run out, they spawn more objects of the same color in random open spaces of the grid. These timer spawns are often placed near the outer edge of the grid and greatly reduce lane availability, thus increasing the difficulty in solving the level. On level 14, wall usage is again increased, and the starting configuration almost reaches the edge of the grid. Level 15 opens with 4 bombs and 7 timer pieces. Oh, by the way, the center timer piece is also shielded. This means you're guaranteed to see the timer run down fully in case you didn't earlier, and pay the heavy price that timer pieces create. You get a reprieve from big-time threats for a couple levels, but the game does a good job of pressuring you by forcing you to restrict lanes at the edges here. Then, at level 18, you get a 7x7 configuration featuring a combination of timer pieces, shielded pieces, and open but tricky wall placement. Incredibly valuable corner pieces and outer lanes are easily blocked by attempting to make matches, and the timer pieces add an enormous amount of pressure. Level 19 features 4 separate 3x3 grids, partially surrounded by walls and open center lanes. While basically every level up to this point has ramped up the difficulty by adding pieces, level 20 features only 5 total objects. 4 objects each placed in the middle row or column surrounded on 3 sides by walls and placed near the edge of the grid, and 1 timer piece at the dead center. It's up to you to build a way to the center to kill the dangerous and highly protected timer piece. The following level also only has 5 pieces, all of which are timer pieces, different colors, and on an island. Once again, the game forces you to build, this time out towards the edges, to be able to create matches. Level 22 features objects covered almost entirely by walls, with only 1 entrance on each side. There's also a timer piece at the center, which is unreachable to start. The game continues to utilize walls, shields, timer pieces, and outer lane restriction to ramp up the difficulty. At levels 23, 24, and 25, the game is completely unrecognizable from the 2-click win on level 1. By expanding on simple and satisfying gameplay, the game continually put me in a flow state by making each level just a bit more difficult than I was used to. I think this is really the first time that a Nancy Drew minigame has done that for me. The game developers utilized only 3 negative components, the wall, shield, and timer block, to add difficulty to levels. Most of a level's difficulty could be attributed to clever placement of blocks, which required sacrificing lanes or delaying matches to ensure you could reach a more valuable piece. I always felt challenged to make the optimal play to be able to clear the board. Aggregation's difficulty leveling is perfect for the game. You wouldn't think that such a simple game could have a strategic depth that inspires me to make an entire video about it, but Aggregation does. A lot of people colloquially call it aggravation because of the randomness in which you typically receive the next piece. There are scripted moments in which you receive bombs and stars, but I would argue that the random aspect of receiving pieces is what makes the game such an interesting strategic decision-making game. Aggregation has a deep and interesting resource management mechanic baked into its design. The, quote, resources I'm referring to are the base pieces themselves, the star, the bomb, and most importantly, the lane that you choose to use and keep available. I think the most ingenious design in Aggregation is also its simplest. Placing a piece that doesn't make a match means you can no longer reach the piece that it landed on in that lane. That also means it takes up its own spot on the grid, which means access across the board behind the placed piece is restricted to other firing lanes than the one you just used. This means the outer lanes are more valuable than the inner lanes because placing a piece towards the edge means restricting access from a firing lane. This also means that the corner of the grid is even more valuable than the outer lanes because having a piece placed in the corner means there are 2 firing lanes restricted by its placement. You must also consider when placing a piece that you'll want to match it later. The order in which you use the lane dictates which matches will be available to you later. You'll often find yourself needing to use 2 firing lanes in tandem, sometimes 3, to be able to efficiently make matches. Aggregation does a fantastic job of restricting lanes with interesting starting configurations and the use of walls to close off lanes for the entirety of the level. This also lends itself to its brilliant difficulty system we discussed earlier, and a very clever piece management system. So what do I mean by piece management? Since the firing lanes continue to hold an object until it's fired, you always have 4 objects that can be used at any time. Having a preview of the next piece requires you to consider not only the move you're making on that turn, but also the consequences of having your next piece entering that firing line. This also means that there are 4 different outcomes to using a piece and having your up next piece replace it. There are also multiple lanes you can use to place your piece, meaning there is, depending on the current configuration, a relatively high number of outcomes to any one turn. Multiplied out across multiple turns, the same level can play out differently depending on how you choose to use and place your pieces. Your success later in the level is often contingent on you having planned for keeping resources available to take care of matches later, or just hoping you get lucky enough to find what you need. Aggregation does a tremendous job of rewarding you for planning ahead and utilizing as many plain pieces as possible for access, then using saved powerful resources like bombs or stars to clear the maximum amount of pieces. When a piece management mechanic is done as well as this, it feels so gratifying to have planned for an outcome, moves ahead, and having your plan come to fruition. Since aggregation has pieces of varying danger, you're forced to prioritize taking out more dangerous pieces like timer pieces as soon as possible. This often means you'll be using more valuable resources like stars and bombs to either clear out timer pieces or to gain access to them. Forcing this prioritization on the player also creates pressure to not fall too far behind the timer piece. In later levels, the game does a good job of forcing you to fall behind with clever use of shield and wall pieces to protect early access to timer pieces. This also means you'll likely be building plain pieces out to the edges to get the bombs and stars to the firing lane you view most beneficial on that level. Aggregation feels like it really rewards good piece management and punishes bad piece management, which is proof of its smart design.
Okay, alright, the testosterone, let's bring it back.
Oh my god, yes!
I think I enjoyed Aggregation so much because it's a game that's really simple on the surface, but there's a depth to it underneath the hood. There are only a few systems in the game, but each system feeds into the other, and they built the game using only a few pieces. They managed the difficulty by taking their few pieces and cleverly rearranging and pairing them in interesting ways. Now in the game, when you have these pieces available to you, you have to be more strategic with them to beat the more difficult levels. I really enjoy discussing these Nancy Drew games and going through the good, the bad, and the ugly. Mid! I'd love to hear your thoughts on the game and the video, so please leave a comment below. This is our first video on the YouTube channel, so if you liked it, please hit the like button and subscribe. And if you want to catch some fresh Nancy Drew content, we stream Nancy Drew games every Sunday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on the Twitch channel. Link is in the description box below. And lastly, if you want to talk to Nancy Drew with a bunch of cool people, the link to our Discord is also in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take care of yourself.